Hey, Retro Rocketeers, another great episode. This episode, we're going to be interviewing actor Kyle T. Heffner. Appeared in a bunch of great movies in the 80s, a bunch of movies and TV shows in the 90s, and he's got a handful of films coming up this year, and we're going to discuss his career. How's it going, Kyle?
Great, Michael. How are you doing?
I'm good. I got about 13 hours of sleep, so I'm well rested.
Oh, nice. Nicely done.
It was one of those days where, like, I really don't have a whole lot to do. I'm just going to keep playing here until I'm done.
Oh, great. That sounds good. I'm glad you're resting.
So, I just want to kind of talk to you about your career and some of your upcoming projects. So, thank you, first of all, for being on the show.
Oh, no problem. It sounded like it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love doing these interviews because you get the. I love character actors, you know, like the supporting actors. They don't get a whole lot of, like a promotion and show and stuff like that. But the movies don't exist without these people around the leads to hold up the film. And you're one of those guys.
Yes, we're always around. We are the flying buttresses of the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to talk to you about how you began. So did you go to school for this?
Yeah, I did. I actually started when I was a kid, around 11, and I was in a children's theater in Chicago called the Jack and Jill Players, and I, my parents noticed, you know, that I had kind of an affinity for performing or something, so there was like, maybe he should be in the theater, I don't know. So anyway, I started at this place, and it was really fun because I was around kids from all over the city, kids that were already working professionally, and it was run by this gentleman, Franklin Adams, who was a wonderful man and very caring and everything. And we were able to be together and work on, I don't know how many, by the time I was 18, I had probably done 30 plays maybe. I don't even know. Just tons and tons of plays.
And that's one of those things that you probably, when you hit like college, you know, that time, that is something you really focus on. This is what I want to do for a living, or did you kind of, I'm not sure, I might do something else and intermix acting with it, or was that like, this is it for me?
No, that was it. And then through children's theater, you know, when things were going on in Chicago, they would call the theater for kids. So I actually did my first commercial and got my Taft-Hartley and SAG because I did a public service announcement. They had called the theater and they wanted some kids, and I went and auditioned with a couple of friends, and actually all three of us did this public service announcement for the police department in Chicago. And I got Taft-Hartley, so that facilitated me joining SAG later when I moved to Los Angeles. And I also did a bunch of educational films through that, and slide films, and, you know, I did those Encyclopedia Britannica films.
Oh, yeah, I remember those.
Britannica presents, you know, Economics and You. You know, I did a bunch of those, and I think I did 6 at least. And then I also worked as a supernumerary with the Lyric Opera of Chicago. So I got to hang out with all these huge opera stars like Marilyn Horne and Tito Gobi, you know, and I'm standing backstage with them, and they're warming up, you know, you know, and spitting, you know. So it was really cool to be around these gigantic opera stars. So then when I got to college, I thought, well, and I went to college. I was a theater major. I went to Northwestern in Evanston, just outside of Chicago. And I thought, you know, maybe I'll have a minor in pre-law. You know, I could always go to law school. And I took my first pre-law course, and I realized I was way out of my league. I remember writing a paper for my poli-sci course, and my professor was actually involved with Washington in terms of the salt talks and all this stuff. And I let a very bright friend of mine read my paper, and he said, you know what, Kyle, it's a good thing you resemble the professor because you really can't write at all.
Yeah, I got that thing too. I'm a theater. I graduated with a theater degree, and I took a couple business classes as like a backup. And I sat there going, I am bored out of my mind. I don't think I could do this for a living, even if it was a backup. So I just said, forget it. I'm just going all in. So I did broadcasting and theater. So.
Oh, good for you. Yeah, you had fun.
Yeah, I mean, I figured I'm paying for it, so I might as well have fun doing it instead of being miserable doing something that might be safe. I just did air quotations, and there's nobody that could possibly see that. I don't know why I did that.
Well, I
So after you graduated, was it kind of scary jumping from your hometown to LA?
No, it was really exciting. Although on the drive to Los Angeles, I drove and I got somebody to share the ride with me, a guy I didn't know, but you know, the ride board, you know, those things. And all the while I'm driving to Los Angeles, I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing? What, you know, how could I possibly, you know, get anything going out there? But I did have a bit of luck. My senior year in college, I was, you know, by the time you're a senior and you've done a lot of stuff, you know, you got a lot of stuff going on. And I did an improv comedy show all during college. Well, my first 3 years, I directed the third year, and then my fourth year, I starred in a video feature that we shot in our new TV studio at the time, and I did the show at school called the Meow Show, which is an improv comedy show that Julie Louis-Dreyfus came out of, Brad Hall, Gary Kroger, Paul Barras, Seth Meyers. I mean, a bunch of people came out of that show. And I don't know if Zach did it. I don't know if Zach Braff did it. I'm not sure. But anyway, that my senior year, Garry Marshall came back, who was also a Northwestern alum. And one of my professors said, you know, Gary's been asking about you. And because we had done a special improv comedy show just for Garry. And they said, go by the studio, and they're interviewing him there tonight, and talk to him. So I was like, okay. So I go by there, and there's like 10 students deep, you know, standing around Garry, waving scripts at him. I mean, it was, you know, crazy. And I was like, you know, I was a college senior and, you know, probably pretty full of myself. And I was like, yeah, I'm not standing in line for anybody. So I went outside, and I was standing on the stairs talking to some other friends, and I get a tap on the shoulder, and I turn around, and it's Garry Marshall. He goes, hello, Kyle, Garry Marshall, how are you? I've seen things, funny, I like it. If you move to Los Angeles, call, we'll sit, we'll talk. And I ended up, I said, well, Garry, I'm moving here in September. He said, we'll call, we'll sit, we'll talk. And so I did have that chit going on. So when I did move to Los Angeles and that fall, I called several times, and I finally got an audience with Garry. And I'd read that Garry liked milkshakes, like in TV Guide. There was no internet. And so I went and I stopped by a burger place, and I got 2 milkshakes, a vanilla and a chocolate. And I had them in this little brown bag, and I go into the office, and Garry goes, Garry says, well, what's in the bag? I said, well, Garry, I read that you like milkshakes, and I have a chocolate and a vanilla. Which one would you like? He says, I'll have the chocolate. So we sat and talked and had our milkshakes, and that was really the beginning. And then Garry opened, he was the king of Paramount at the time, you know, with Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley.
Right.
And he opened his office to me. I could go into his call his office anytime. I could go on the Paramount lot. I could see any taping I wanted. They'd have a seat taped off for me. He was quite lovely. And then when he did his first feature, which was Young Doctors in Love, another friend of mine, Kim Lewis, was working for him as well from school. And I ran into her. She says, Gary's doing this movie, and you know, you should really get your stuff in. And I finally did, after she goaded me several times. And then I went and auditioned, and Garry put me to work for 10 weeks on that film.
Yeah, I just watched it again. I haven't seen it in about 6 years, and I forgot. He really had a good control over the level of jokes. I don't think there's a single dud in that movie. The story itself is compelling. At the same time, it's rampant silliness.
It is. It is, and what an amazing cast. I mean, everybody... I mean, Demi Moore is in the film.
Right. It's like a first movie for a lot of people. I think it's Rick Overton's first movie. Taylor Negron, rest in peace.
Yes.
His first movie.
Yes.
And it's weird just seeing so many people for like the first time. I think Mike McKean, of course, had been on Vernon and Shirley, but I think it was his first movie as well. I may be wrong about that.
It could have been, and I think Sean had just finished Blade Runner.
Yeah, that sounds right. And she had done Stripes too. But getting all those people together for one movie and seeing so much talent come out of that was amazing. Oh yeah, and Richard Dean Anderson in a really early role as like a drug dealer.
Oh wow, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, sadly, that movie is out of print. I hope someone picks it up and puts it back out. But you can find it. I think like you can pay download to stream like $3 on Amazon or something like that to get it. It's a really good movie. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, great! I'm so glad you did. I always thought it was funny, and it was during the airplane era, so I think it was right after Airplane. I
Yeah.
think it was the spoof era at that point. So he was spoofing, and he had all the people from General Hospital. That's why Demi Moore was there, and Jacqueline Seaman was there, and tons of people from the soap operas.
And so that led to Flashdance. Am I correct?
It did because the producer of Young Doctors in Love was Jerry Bruckheimer.
That's right. That's right. I remember seeing that name going, didn't he do Flashdance? So he had
He
seen you
did.
and decided to cast you in that?
He did, and then Jerry teamed with Don Simpson right after that, and they had Jerry had done Cat People, I think, and then they teamed up and they put together Flashdance, and I went and read for that, 3 or 4 times, and met Adrian, and when I was auditioning for it, actually at the final callback, I knew that it might be a potential callback, but I didn't know. But my parents were visiting from Chicago, and I drove them to Vegas. And I got to Vegas, and I checked my service, the old check your service days, and it was like, you have an audition this afternoon at 4 or 5 or 6 or something like that at Paramount with the producers and the director of Flashdance. So I got my parents in the room, and I hopped on a plane and flew back to Los Angeles and drove to Paramount. And it had been a long day, so I was over on the side of the lot doing some Tai Chi to relax myself, get myself nice and centered. And I go into the audition. It was in a bungalow at Paramount, and I meet Adrian Lyne, and Adrian says, we were looking out the window, and we saw you over there in the corner waving your arms about. You're waving your arms and legs about. What was all that? And I said, oh my God, you saw me. I said, well, I was just doing some Tai Chi to relax. He said, oh, it was wonderful, it was marvelous. And then I came out of the audition, and there was this beautiful young girl sitting there, and she said, would you like some candy? She had a bag of candy. And I took some candy from her, and we were talking, and she was quite lovely. And it turned out it was Jennifer Beals, and we were, seeing, I guess, if we had any candy chemistry. But it was all a very interesting process to get that film.
Yeah, it's funny. The movie was a massive success, and it was something that there was real no big names attached to it. It's just like that period of time where any movie had a chance of being a big hit. It doesn't seem like that works that way now. It's like you have to have a big A-lister, you have to have tons and tons of promotion. Back then, they let movies grow, and if I remember correctly, I was very young, but Flashdance didn't really become like a big thing in the first couple weeks. Is like as it built. A lot of movies used to do that. They would build and stick around for months on end. Am I
Yeah,
wrong?
they would be very patient, and no one had any hopes for the film. In fact, I was seeing another film. I remember I was at the Fox Theater, I think, where actually the Flashdance premiere turned out to be. And I was sitting here watching another movie, and the Flashdance trailer came on, and the audience roared with laughter. Roared. Welder by day, dancer by night. The audience was on the floor laughing, and I went, oh man, this is going to be good. This is not going to be good. But it turned out to be good, and everyone was very surprised. I think Paramount as well, because I think they had sold off a portion of the film.
So the funny thing about Richie is if you hadn't played him as so endearing, like kind of the boy next door, like kind of, he seems a little bit awkward and uncomfortable at times. If you hadn't done that with the character, I don't think the jokes would have aged so well, because that's a lot of Polish jokes. And
Yeah, really not politically correct, but the idea was, I think, to have him do bad jokes that had to reinforce the idea that he didn't make it in Hollywood because he comes back. So, you know what I mean? That
right,
he wasn't ready. So I think it had to be clear that he wasn't ready for Hollywood.
right, and it's kind of such a sad ending. I mean, it's an honest ending, But at the end, he comes back, tail between his legs, and he runs into his old girlfriend, and they kind of end the story. Was that supposed to be the end of his character, or was there anything that was cut out?
No, that was the end. There was one scene cut, and it wasn't, in retrospect, clearly it wasn't necessary, was when Jeannie runs off to the strip joint. Jennifer came, or Alex, came to see me in my hovel where I lived, and we actually shot it in a transient hotel in downtown Los Angeles. And it had quite an aroma in there. And she came to see me and told me that she was in the strip joint. But I think I moved on. I mean, the way they structured my character is that I was like, well, it's not my deal. I don't remember what the scene was, but it was, I clearly didn't go with Jennifer to get her out of the strip joint.
Right.
And they just let my character do that and let Jennifer be the hero, which has worked out really well.
Now, after that, did it get easier to get roles, or do you still have to do the normal thing, like go in, do the auditions, go through the whole thing where you like just the same thing as any other actor, or did it get a little bit easier?
Well, it got a lot easier. It got a lot easier for a while because, I was known then. And so I did have a lot of opportunities. And I did, things would not really come to me, but like when I don't know what was right after that. I don't know if it was Woman in Red or Runaway Train.
That was Woman in Red.
It was Woman in Red. So Woman in Red, yes. Gene Wilder just invited me to his house for tea, and we sat in his living room and talked and joked around for a little bit. Gilda brought us some tea, and we sat and joked around, and then he offered me to film.
The funny thing about that character, your character does not say a whole lot. You do more like mime. You do a lot with your face without saying anything, and yet your role is very pivotal to that movie because the way things work out with Gilda's character, and the way it works with she falls in love with you instead of Gene Wilder. And it's funny just watching because you say so much without saying a single word. Was that kind of hard to keep that contained?
No, not at all. No, I mean that's perfectly wonderful. I enjoyed. I mean, I'm working with Gene Wilder, a childhood era, and no, that was perfectly fine. It's like the old Steve McQueen adage. He would go through the script and reduce his lines. I don't need to say that, I'll show it. I don't need to say that, I'll show it. So it's perfectly fine to have limited dialogue.
It gives you more to. Sometimes you have the dialogue, but it makes you work harder to say something with just your face and your body movements. It's good. It's good training, I would say, for an actor.
Yeah, it's yes, it's great training, and it's just all part of creating the picture that one is trying to present in the film. If you can show it rather than say it, it's much better.
Now, the next two movies you did, both in 1985, I think are absolutely fantastic. Yet one has been kind of forgotten, and one has been, growing over the years as one of the greatest action movies of all time. The first one is Warning Sign, which I have, which I think is severely out of print, but it's a fantastic movie. It's basically a zombie movie. It's like the first Rage Virus movie before 28 Days Later did it. Now,
really? Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's the first movie to ever use that kind of twist.
And what about it?
Oh, no, I thought it was a fantastic movie. I know you're not in it much, but it's one of those movies that I thought, wow, this really needs to be discovered again. And it's just kind of a shame that it's kind of lost.
That's interesting. Yeah, it was, again, that was, I guess, now that I'm thinking about it, it was so long ago, but that was also, hey, Kyle, do you want to come in and do this movie for a week? And who's in it? Oh, Sam Waterston, Kathleen Quinlan, Yaphet Kotto. Yeah, I'll come and do whatever you guys want. So it was great for me because I was working with Yaphet Kotto and Meshach Taylor, who left us a couple of years ago. And so I got to know Meshach. I knew who he was. So we had a great time. And Yaphet is just a wonderful man, just terrific. And I wasn't actually in scenes with Waterston and Quinlan, but we kind of hung out a little bit, and I was really happy to be around all of these gigantic talents. It was
Yeah.
really
Now, of course, you spent 2 movies in 1 year. You're behind a console. That had to get a little bit like, can I please move around a little bit? Because Runaway Train, you are like the lead of the whole computer system that the train system runs on, and that's probably one of your meatiest roles. I mean, you're in a huge chunk of that movie,
yeah,
and it,
yes.
the funny thing, the movie is one of the most amazing action films I've ever seen. It still holds up to this day, and the whole thing is really brutal, unrelenting in its vision. It's one of the most complete movies I've ever seen. At no point does the director waver in his vision and give you something that would make you more comfortable. It's uncompromised, and the performances are amazing all around.
Oh wow, yeah, it was. That was really interesting too. Again, that was a quick one. I replaced another actor who fell out, and I went into the set. I remember walking onto the set, and this scary looking guy was walking up to me, and it was Voight, in makeup, and he was he was in his full makeup, and I didn't recognize him, and I said hello, and he kind of peered at me, and I went to the trailer, and I met with Konchalovsky, and we talked for hang on one second. I
Okay.
could call you next hour, and I read the script, and I kind of had a handle on the character, and so we talked on a Friday, and I think I went to work on the Monday.
That's a lot to remember in just a weekend. Did you have to like pack that into your brain, all your dialogue?
It was very, very fast.
Now, who's bigger, John Voight or John P. Ryan?
I'm sorry?
Which is a bigger? I mean, these both men seem enormous. John Voight or John P. Ryan? Because you had to meet both of them. They seem like really big, intimidating guys.
Well, actually, most people, a lot of actors may do that on screen, but they're quite lovely in person. And that's just their screen persona. Both men are terrifically warm and great. I mean, it's not, they're not their screen persona. They're, just terrific guys.
So it must have made that scene where John P. Ryan has to shove your head into a urinal easier to handle if he didn't terrify you.
Oh, not at all. No, it was, I mean, when we're acting, he was, but sitting around, he's just a warm, lovely guy. And that scene, in fact, the director showed me that the urinal was perfectly clean, and they put water in it, and to color it slightly the color of urine, they put a lovely French apple juice in it. So my skin was terrific and glowing after that.
Yeah, so the movie itself, for the most part, is set outside in the freezing, freezing cold, but luckily you got to stay in the warm console area. You must have been grateful
Yes,
for that. Like, I don't have to go outside, we're good.
Yeah, no, all of that other stuff had been shot. We were the very last.
Oh.
The interiors of the control room were the very last things to be shot, if my memory serves me correctly. They might have gone back to shoot a little extra stuff, but I think the bulk of the movie was done. And I know they were shooting they had some mock-ups of the train. I think they did a bunch of close-ups and stuff. And they were shooting in the Pan Pacific Auditorium. It was not a huge budget film. It was Canon, and the old Pan Pacific Auditorium, which was where that Pan Pacific Park is located next to the Grove. There was an old theater there, or it was a large structure, but I know it was called the Pan Pacific Auditorium, but that's where some of the train stuff, because they had a whole train built inside of there.
Oh, okay.
And my stuff was shot in an old silent film studio in downtown LA. I don't even remember the name of it. I'm sure it doesn't even exist.
Yeah, a lot of people think that Canon Pictures only made like cheap exploitation movies, like Chuck Norris, Charles Bronson movies. But they would take the profits from those movies and put them into more artistic efforts. So while, yes, they had missing in action and ninja movies, they would take those profits and put them into movies like Runaway Train, which got Oscar nominations, so it was worth spending the money on. And that's what a lot of people forget about that company.
Yes, I think they do. they did a really good job, and hiring Konchalovsky to direct the script based on a Kurosawa script was a really good move. And, it got, I think, at least 3 Oscar nominations for John and Eric and the cinematographer, who actually was the same cinematographer as Young Doctors in Love.
Oh, no kidding. That's a completely different look for those movies.
Well, he's a very talented guy.
Very versatile.
Yeah, very talented.
After that, you kind of intermixed like pilot shows and guest features and stuff like that, and like some like Spellbinder, Angel 3, which I watched Angel 3 the other day. Not that bad. I expected I expected to be like really exploitation. I was like, oh, it's pretty good.
Well, yeah, and I got to work with Richard Roundtree. I think was in it.
Yeah, he was. But I was wondering, you did the pilot episodes. I noticed that you did one with Garry Marshall. It was a pilot episode with Michael Richards, and it was called Herndon. Did that ever air?
I think it aired. There used to be this kind of season at the end of the summer or during the summer where it was called like the pilot graveyard, and they'd air pilots that didn't make it. I don't know. I don't think they do it anymore, but back in those days they used to do that. And I think they did air it. And of course this was pre-Seinfeld, and everyone knew Michael was an immense talent. And Garry put this thing together, and I thought it was pretty funny. It was very funny, and I had a great time and got to know Michael really well. And Michael was doing very similar to what he ended up doing on Seinfeld, a lot of physical humor. And I remember he and I had a whole thing with a water bottle, from the water cooler, like in the office.
Uh-huh.
He had a whole thing where he was juggling this water cooler and spilling water all over everybody, and it was kind of like the wacky guy, I think, with an office job. It's kind of like the Seinfeld episode where he's working, he's going to work.
Right.
I'm working now. Yeah. So that was really interesting, and I'd worked with him. I knew him, of course. I'd worked with him on Young Doctors in Love as well.
The funny thing is, I remember they used to do that. They would burn off the stuff during the summer and give it a chance, at least if someone had positive reception to it, it might get picked up. I kind of wish the networks would let us choose what's on the air. Like, let us view all the pilots, and if we like them, instead of like, well, this doesn't fit with our schedule, but what if it's a good show? That's the thing that always bothered me. Just let it breathe. Let people have a chance to decide themselves whether it's going to be worth keeping as a series.
Yeah, I think the Amazon model, I don't know if it's Amazon.
It is.
I think it's Amazon. The Amazon model is purportedly to be like that, but I'm not sure that they will air, they'll make a pilot available and see what the response is. That's supposedly their model, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's right. They'll test out, like they did the Zombieland TV show, and people were like, "Where's the original cast?" And it didn't work out. But some other shows that they took to, like that new one, Transcendence, I think is what it's called. But whatever, they let people choose what is going to be on the air, which I think is a great idea, which they should go back to.
Yes, and a friend of mine was in one. A friend of mine, James McDaniel, was in one called Hysteria.
Okay.
And I think with Nina Suvari. And that I remember that was the model for that. That's what they were waiting for the response and all of that. So I think so. I think they're trying it, on the new platforms. I think they're trying to do it that way, but I don't know.
Yeah. So you had done about 3 or 4 TV appearances and a couple of pilots, and then that led to When Harry Met Sally.
It did. That was really lovely. That was. That role again, I did not have a lot of dialogue. In fact, there was so little dialogue that when I went and met with Rob Reiner, I read another character's role. And then Rob right there said, "Hey, well, you know what? You'll do it. Cancel the rest of the meeting." And, which was great. And, but I ended up, I think working on that maybe 2 weeks, because we shot a couple things in LA, and then I went to New York and worked on it for a week there, which was great fun.
Yeah, it's funny, is that movie I just watched again a couple nights ago, and it still stands up. Almost all these movies that you appeared in, they nothing ages whatsoever. It still stands the test of time, and it doesn't
Well,
like, oh, that was just of the moment kind of thing.
well, you probably
Has
have
to feel
never
good.
seen Mutant on the Bounty.
I'm sorry.
Well, you probably never saw Mutant on the Bounty. No,
Actually, I did. I was just about to mention it. I just watched Mutant on the Bounty. Um, yeah, it had to be rough being in makeup the entire movie, huh?
well, that was interesting. Actually, the funny part was the first time they put all the makeup on, the prosthetic, the glue they used was too strong, and it took them over 2 hours to get it off.
That had
Uh,
to hurt.
yeah, it was. It took a while. It was millimeter by millimeter, using a solvent to get it off.
Ugh.
And they figured it out later. They cut the amount of adhesive they used. Um, but yeah, that took a bit to get it off. But that was interesting because what you learn doing that is when you don't have your regular face to use, how much you use your eyes and your vocal inflection and the rest of your body. So it was a very interesting constraint. It was a really interesting exercise. It really was.
Yeah, I mean, you were saying earlier when I was trying to find this movie, it was like, I'm not so sure about that one. But I mean, you learned a lot from that movie. You know, it was your first lead, and you had to spend the entire thing in makeup, and it's very confined shooting. You know, you're all in that the fake spaceship. I don't think it's a bad movie, but you can see, like, you know, of course, special effects advance so fast that it kind of, that looks of that time.
It does. Yeah, we were shooting up in a studio in Santa Clarita, as I recall. But again, I got to work with John Fleck, you know, very talented performance artist. And I've been so lucky to work and meet with such really interesting people over all the years, you know.
Yeah. So I would say, even though it may not, it doesn't get a lot of exposure, it is out of print. I think it's on. I think yeah, I'm getting it on VHS, which I still have a VCR. Be surprised, I still have a VCR. Yeah, so that's how I end up getting it from a used copy. So
What?
then I would say probably for most of the '90s, you did a lot of TV, and a lot of that probably, um, you know, it built up to the big Seinfeld episode, which is probably one of the most memorable episodes of all time. Did it get it frustrating though at times? Like, you know, just doing one episode a year. Did you ever be like, I don't know, should I do something else, or what kept you going after all this? You know, like those certain gaps where there'd be like a burst of work, then not so much, a burst of work, and not so much.
Well, it was interesting. Early on, I used to keep an application to Yale grad school handy. And every time I got frustrated, I'd fill out another line going, I'm going to grad school, screw this. Um, but I I don't know. I've always felt like this is what I do, and I really back myself into a corner, Michael, and I don't really have any other skills. I can't do anything else. I've learned, I can do a little, I can change the thing in the toilet tank. I can do that now. Um, now that, I've been alive a while and had to do things around the house. But it's always what I've done, and also during those years, I was doing a lot of commercials, so that really kept me going. That kept me going financially, and creatively, I did a lot of theater, and every now and then I'd go out and do stand up. So,
Oh, cool.
so when I would find if I was bored, I would go do a play. I've done probably 25 equity waiver plays in Los Angeles, and commercially, I've probably done around 100 national commercials. Um, and when I was doing commercials, I was working with the King. I was working with a guy named Joe Pitka, and he and I worked really well together. And I may have done, I don't know, 20 to 30 spots with Joe.
All right, Joe
And
Pitka directed Space Jam, right?
yes, he did.
Okay, I was wondering if it was the same guy.
And he and I had a wonderful working relationship. And he doesn't shoot so many anymore. The last one I did with him was for the Winter Olympics, I think 4 years ago. Not the last one, the one before. But I worked with him quite a bit. So that kept me going financially. The plays and stand-up kept me going spiritually and creatively. And then although, I wrote a bunch of screenplays with friends, spec scripts. I've done, several indies that I've produced. Um, so because I feel and I tell my friends, I said, if we're creators, then create. You don't need, you don't have to be on the set, or you don't have to have the job. Keep creating. And if you, and that's what I try to do. That I just try to have some fun.
Right.
And do interesting things. So I just kind of follow what's going on, and people call me to do plays periodically, and now it's web series. People call you to do their web series, and I've been around a while. I know a bunch of people, so I'm able to stay alive creatively pretty well.
So I would say probably any great advice to give to young actors is just constantly create. Don't wallow in the slow periods. Just constantly be on the move.
Yes, I think so, and I mean I can't say that I never wallowed, but then you people tell you get a sport, So I started playing tennis, and riding and cycling, and you have to have things to do during the downtime, because I'd never, after I shot Young Doctors in Love, I had worked as a stereo salesman in LA. I was a high pressure stereo salesman, and when they used to have stereo stores, and so after I shot Young Doctors in Love, I had all this leisure time which I had never had in my life. When I was in college, I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs while I was going to school, while I was doing a play, and doing everything else. So I've always been incredibly busy. So after Young Doctors in Love, I'm like, what do you do with all this time? I'm not a sit by the pool guy.
Right.
So I started playing tennis and, things like that.
Right. I think we're alike in mind. You always kind of hustle for whatever you want instead of just sitting there waiting for it to happen. And that's the kind of thing I can respect. Always keep yourself busy because, there is only so much life you have. You might as well fill it with adventures.
Yes, and I've had quite a few adventures. So, yes, and then I met my wife, and we got married, and now I have 2 kids, and that's pretty busy. So they're older now. My son Colin is 17, a high school junior. My daughter's Katya, who's graduated and working toward being an elementary school teacher.
Oh,
and
cool.
They're lovely kids.
Did they ever contemplate acting?
They are not. No, I kind of thought maybe they would, but neither one had gone that way. My son is an athlete, which is really interesting to me. I was always athletic. I did mime and all that stuff, but I was never did organized sports. So
right.
Being involved with him with organized sports has been really interesting and fascinating and really fun, because it's something I knew absolutely nothing about.
What's his sport?
Well, he went through baseball, he went through soccer, he had a brief flirtation with football, and now he's taking pole vaulting pretty seriously.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Not a lot of people say that. You usually hear basketball, baseball, but yeah, pole vaulting, that's very specific.
It's very specific.
Well, it'd be cool to see him in the Olympics in a couple years.
Yes, well, he's very good at it, and he's pretty focused, so we'll see what happens.
So after all doing a lot of that TV work, you did a really good movie. I don't think it got a lot of exposure, and I just rented it on Netflix. It's Shrink Wrap.
Oh wow, Michael, you're awesome. Thank you so much.
I do my research.
Yes, Shrink Wrap. My friend Doug Cox wrote the screenplay, and he wanted to do this film, and I read it, and I had I'd written and produced another indie which got nothing. You wouldn't even be able to. I'd have to show it to you. Called Lords of Los Angeles. So I'd been through the indie world. I'd actually gone through the entire process of producing an indie, and I read the screenplay, and I said, "Well, Doug, this is a great script. It would be great, but I have to play this character." And Doug believed me for some reason, and Doug's a very talented guy. He's one of the founding members of the Groundlings.
Oh, okay.
And so we put the film together, and we had a really good time shooting it. And we did get it out there a little bit. Where did you find it?
I rented it on Netflix.
Oh, great. Oh, I didn't know it was on Netflix. That's awesome.
Yeah, it has extra features on it too, so someone did a good job filling it with stuff.
Oh, that's great news.
I would say anybody who's listening to this, I highly recommend it. I'll say this. Okay, to be honest, the trailer doesn't sell the movie. The trailer, it doesn't flow and everything. I was like, I don't know about this movie. And then I watched it. I was like, wow, this was awesome. You and Lyndon Ashby worked together very well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, he's a terrific actor, and we had a great time. And Eddie McDaniel was so great. And I brought in a couple of my friends, Priscilla Barnes, who's wonderful. I was in acting class with her before she did Three's Company, so I've known her a long time.
Okay.
And Richard Kind, I went to college with Richard, and brought Richard aboard. And it was a really interesting shoot. And Doug Cox, the writer, director, producer, just incredibly disciplined and wonderful to work with, because we made our days, and he got it cut, he got it out there, really interesting. So we lucked out with that one very much. We did a lot of film festivals with that. I think we did, not a lot, but we did 3 or 4. I think we were second runner-up for the Audience Award at Dances with Films in Santa Monica.
Uh-huh.
We did Sarasota, we did Jacksonville, and we did New Orleans. We had a really fun run with that. Really fun run.
Is it expensive traveling around to all those film festivals?
Well, I don't know. It was fun.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking of the weird.
It was really fun. So,
that was a downer moment. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it was really fun. So I don't know how expensive it was. You buy an airplane ticket and you check into the travel lodge, or you stay at Motel 6 or whatever, and you have a great time. So, and you go to New Orleans and eat a lot of oysters. So,
yeah.
And po' boys. So you have a great time, and it's just part of the thing. You have to work the festival. You get to talk to people. You meet tons and tons of people, and you watch a lot of great movies.
Sounds fun. So it looks like you've been working more now than you ever have before. Your IMDb page is loaded over the last 2 years. That has to feel good.
It's interesting, and I just noticed that I have 57 credits, and I was born in 1957, and I might be 57 years old, but I'm not going to say that. And, so 57 is really interesting right now. Yeah, I've been really lucky recently. I've also been very focused. My kids are older; they don't need me as much. I feel there's a Kevin Spacey quote which I really like, and I use it kind of as a mantra to myself almost daily. Pardon me, which is get out of your own way, and I try to do that. And when you're young and you have a lot of success, I didn't have a lot of success. I've never been paid a 7-figure salary or a 6-figure salary. I've always just scraped it together every year, and but I've had a lot of visibility. And when you're young, you don't realize how lucky you are. You're like, oh wow, okay, this is the way it's going to be. But it's not the way it's going to be. You have to keep working incredibly hard. It's something I didn't realize when I was younger. I'm just being upfront with you here, Michael. I didn't realize how lucky I was, and I didn't realize how much more work I thought, because I'd worked so hard. I worked very hard from 11 to 23, very, very hard, and I kind of slacked off a little bit. And I believe that the reason I have been able to get a couple of things going recently is that I've really returned to being very, very focused and working incredibly hard.
And it's paying off.
Yes, and as one of my good friends has said to me frequently, James McDaniel, who was in Hysteria, he says, work harder. The secret to success is everyone else. And so that's what I try to do. When I have auditions, I spend hours on it. Hours. And when I go to work, I spend hours preparing.
And you never look down on the material either. Whatever you show up in, no matter how big or small it is, you never seem to treat it like, oh, this is a tiny budget movie. I don't really need to try as hard. I mean, I watched the Book of Daniel, and that has a completely different budget than Red Sky, and at no point do I see you like phoning it in.
Oh, thank you very much. That was really interesting because it was dialogue heavy, so I had to. It required a lot of work, and actually, while I was shooting that on one of my days off, I went in and shot. It was very small, but I went in and shot a little bit on Shameless. So I was like, burning the candle at both ends. I was like, oh, I got to trim my beard. I got to color it back in. I got to run off and do this Shameless. And I think I might have done a General Hospital episode during that too. It was like a wacky 2 weeks. Very wacky 2 weeks. But yes, I was really excited to do that film, and I'd never done a Bible film. And I thought, well, this is an opportunity to do something I've never done before. And everyone loves the Daniel and the Lion's Den story. And I was working with a terrific director, and the cast was great. I mean, even Gallagher is in that film.
Yeah.
It's
Which threw me off at first. I kept looking at it going, that sure looks like Gallagher, because I haven't seen him in a while. And it slowly dawned on me, I go, oh, that is Gallagher.
Yeah, Gallagher, Lance Henriksen. I mean, it's a really interesting cast, and it was fun. It was an interesting challenge to do something so dialogue heavy. So that did require a lot of work and a lot of fish oil. I take a lot of fish oil to keep my brain intact.
Yeah. And then that led to Free Ride, where you don't have a whole lot of dialogue, but you're another one of those like small but pivotal turns in the movie is based on your character and what happens to you. And I can't remember Eddie Pepitone's character, but you play Dwayne, the best fisherman in Florida, and Eddie Pepitone, and they end up in this situation which turns the whole movie on a dime into something much more sinister.
Yes, that was a terrific film, written and directed by a friend of mine, Shauna Betts, and it's based on her life story. And I remember reading the script early on before we went into production, and I really thought it was terrific. I said, Shauna, this is a terrific script. And she ended up writing that role for me, actually. A character named Dwayne, and I kind of based it on my brother, whose name is Dwayne, who is a Vietnam vet, and that was kind of all my backstory, which you didn't know, but it was all going on in my head. And yeah, we were in Sarasota for over, I think, 2.5 weeks, and really interesting. Great to work with Anna and Eddie. Really interesting. Again, that was an interesting thing to do, and I hadn't played that guy either. A guy who's on the boat, Vietnam vet, running drugs, doing drugs. Really fun to do.
Yeah, actually, even though a lot of people think that character actors play the same character, that's kind of like a mistake there, because most people, it doesn't work that way. You just play characters, and you kind of bury yourself into the character. And I've never really seen you repeat the same style. I mean, obviously, a lot of times you play like the nice guy in the business suit, or like the military or police, kind of government guy. But at the same time, they all seem completely different.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I try to drop into whoever, I need to be for that character. I try to do that. So, and then you just keep doing it, and then suddenly you've been doing it for 33 years, and, it's a whole bunch of different people.
And I just watched Red Sky. Now, Red Sky, I don't believe was in theaters. I think it was specifically made for video on demand. It's not on disc. I rented it on Vudu, and it's available at a bunch of sites. It's like $6. It works the way it works in theaters. You instead of paying the ticket price and traveling to a theater, you just rent it at home, and it's the same price. You don't have to go traveling to try to find it. And I really enjoyed that movie.
Oh, great!
It was based on the book Kerosene Cowboys, right?
Yes, it is. It is based on Kerosene Cowboys, and it was directed, and I think you might have covered it in the script, by another friend of mine, Mario Van Peebles, who I had done a pilot with called DC Cop back in the 80s. And I liked the script very much, and again, it was really interesting, and I got to work with Bill Pullman. I mean,
yeah, that's awesome.
Come on, and Bill is terrific, and we worked very well together, and again, very fun, and to be in this kind of flyer movie, really interesting. Again, another great cast. I mean, all those guys in that cast are pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think it's the second movie you did with Cam Gigagan. Isn't he in Free Ride as well? Is that how you say his name? Cam Gigagan? Or Giga... I don't know how to say it.
Oh, Cam, yeah, I think it's Gigandet or...
What?
Yeah.
No clue. Was I...
I'm waiting for my next movie that I work with Cam again.
Yeah, what was I going to say? Oh, Red Sky. Where was that shot? Is it actually set in Russia? Did you fly over there?
I didn't shoot in Russia. We shot a little at Fallon Naval Air Station, and then we were shooting in Fallon. We shot in Fallon, Nevada, where the Fallon Naval Air Station is located.
Right.
The rest of the cast, they actually did go to Russia, and they did have an agreement with the Russian Air Force, and it was, they did work well with them. They worked with them. They were there, I think, a month.
I think they set up the movie as to be a franchise. I would love to see a Red Sky 2 and see you come back.
I would love to come back. Yeah, the way the movie ends, it looks like, well, what are these guys going to do next?
Yeah, like the next adventure. I don't know. Let's see what happens. If, like I said, if listeners go find it on Vudu, it's only like $3 to rent, $6 to own, or something like that. So it's totally worth the money. So the one thing I have to ask you real quick is, what is a volcano zombie, and how do they exist? Because you have a movie coming up called The Burning Dead, which was called Volcano Zombies.
Yeah.
I just don't know how that's possible.
Okay, well, they evidently, I talked to the producer, and he said that they could not use the title, they didn't want zombies in the title. So he had to find another title, and he came up with The Burning Dead. Now, again, I did not have a zombie movie. Well, I did have warning sign.
Which is it's a rage virus, but it has kind of like the same feel.
Yeah, and Mark Sykes had called me in to read for this film, and I was like, it'd be kind of fun to do a zombie movie, and have to actually work with the zombies. And warning sign, I didn't get to actually have scenes with the zombies. I don't want to be a spoiler, but I actually have scenes with the actual zombies.
Cool.
In the Burning Dead, and it was not the largest budget, but it was interesting. It was a very interesting film, and I got to work with the very talented Julia Lehman, and it was actually really fun. It was really fun. I was actually I think I shot it a couple of years ago, year and a half. Anyway, I was actually shooting a scene with zombies on Halloween.
Nice.
Can't do that.
In the next two movies you have coming up, you have Bereave with Malcolm McDowell, Jane Seymour, and Keith Carradine. Is that coming out soon?
Yes. I'm not sure. I think they're doing festivals, and he said I talked to the creators a couple of days ago, and they're going to have some news in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
I know they're looking at festivals, and again, a terrific screenplay. And I mean, I got to work with Seymour and Malcolm McDowell and Carradine and Mike Starr. I got to work with all of them, and it was pretty spectacular. Again, an indie, a smaller budget, so no one is off to themselves. We're shooting in this large apartment building in Hollywood, and so we're all in one room together. And I'm sitting in a room with Carradine and Malcolm McDowell and Jane Seymour, and and Mike Starr. Everybody's just telling stories, and I'm in complete heaven, Michael. It's just complete heaven. I'm sitting there hearing these Hollywood stories from Carradine and Mike Starr and McDowell it was really spectacular. exactly.
I think Mike Starr is severely underrated.
Oh, and what a terrific guy! And he's got the best stories. If you ever, interview him or meet him, he'll just keep you going forever.
Wow, that sounds
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, and it was kind of like story competition. I didn't even get involved. I was so amazed just listening to all the stories. I just sat there and soaked it all in.
And you get paid to do it.
I did, yes, I did. And Jane Seymour had the wrap party at her lovely home in Malibu, and it was a spectacular experience. Um, they let me do a lot of improvisation, and I have very high hopes for that film. Very high hopes.
No, I can't wait to see it. So you have actually a movie coming out here. It looks like January 21st. I don't know if IMDb's wrong, but I would hate to miss the opportunity to promote it. And it's The Downside of Bliss.
The Downside of Bliss, yes. Now that we're talking about this, Michael, I'm going, yeah, I have been really lucky because in The Downside of Bliss, I got to work with Judd Nelson. And Judd, is a legend, and I actually worked with Judd before I had recurred on Suddenly Susan.
Oh, that's right.
Of that, and I knew Judd from that, and we had a great time. I mean, again, I got to play a character I hadn't really done yet, so I'm a big-time music producer, and I colored it a little bit differently than other things I've done. So I got to be the big macher. I got to be the big dude, and very, I think, well directed. It was a good screenplay, and I'm playing with Judd, so that was a really fun time. I'm not sure about that release date. I haven't had any information on that, so that could very well be. I will look forward to, Michael. I don't know.
All right. Is there anything else that I'm missing you have coming up you want to talk about?
Um, what else? I think that's it.
Okay.
I think that's it for now. I'm casually working on a web series called Fubar Chat, which is based on ride sharing. And I wanted to do something on the web. I want to do something on the internet. And we talked about what you do during your downtime.
Uh-huh.
And so I wanted to do something that I could do creatively and something I hadn't done before for it. So I bought some little, they're not GoPros, but I bought GoPro-like cameras. And I put them in my car. And I call my talented friends. And we drive around and joke around. And it's not like, in driving in the car, comedians with coffee. It's not like Jerry's. It's a little different than that. Some of my friends might be recognizable, but we don't. It's not an interview show like that. But try to create a little comedy and have some fun. So I'm working on that. It's called Fubar Chat, FUBAR. The acronym fucked up the honor recognition, and because I think one tends to drive a lot of drunk people in those cars, and so that's on Funny or Die and YouTube and places like that.
Okay, yeah, send me a link when you get going with it, and I'll post it on the page.
Oh, great! That would be awesome, Michael. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you for sitting with me for the last hour. I didn't realize I was going to take up so much of your time.
How long? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, what?
Michael, I really wanted to say I appreciate this, and I wanted to say thank you so much for watching all of those things. You did your exhaustive research, and that's quite extraordinary.
Well, I already knew you from some of the stuff that you had done, and then I was just like really digging into your resume, and I was like, oh, I got to pick that up, because you never know what is going to be amazing and that needs to be talked about, because there's, I'm sure you've talked ad nauseum about like the big movies and the Seinfeld appearance and everything like that, but there's some of that stuff that really needs to be talked about, and I'm glad we got to discuss it.
Well, thank you very much, Michael.
All right, listeners, that's the end of our episode. Thank you for all your support, and have a good night.
Thanks, Michael. Good night.